On August 12, 2000, there were 23 Russian sailors alive at the bottom of the Barents Sea. Their submarine had just been ripped apart by 2 explosions. 95 of their crewmates were already dead. The water was rising, the lights had gone out, the temperature was dropping toward freezing, and one of them, a 27-year-old officer who had been married for exactly 4 months, pulled out a piece of paper and began writing in the dark. His name was Dmitri Kolesnikov. The note he wrote was found in his pocket when his body was recovered. It read, "It is dark here to write, but I will try by feel. It seems like there are no chances, 10 to 20%. Regards to everybody. No need to despair." Norway offered to send divers the next day. Russia said no. 5 days later, when they finally let the Norwegians open the hatch, every one of those 23 men was dead. Here is what happened. The K-141 Kursk was a nuclear-powered guided missile submarine, an Oscar II class, Project 949A. It was 154 meters long, roughly the length of 2 jumbo jets placed nose to tail. It displaced over 18,000 tons submerged. It carried 24 supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles designed to sink American aircraft carriers from 550 kilometers away. It had 2 nuclear reactors, could stay submerged for 120 days, and could outrun most of the ships trying to find it. The Russian Navy considered the Kursk the finest submarine in its fleet. The crew had been selected and trained for years. Captain First Rank Gennady Lyachin had taken command in 1996 and led the Kursk on a 6-month deployment shadowing the American 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean during the Kosovo crisis in 1999. When the Kursk returned to its home port of Vidyayevo on the Kola Peninsula, the crew was recognized as the best submarine crew in the Northern Fleet. Lyachin was 45 years old. He had spent his entire career underwater. On August 10, 2000, the Kursk sailed out for a major naval exercise called Summer X. It was the first large-scale exercise the Russian Navy had conducted since the Soviet Union collapsed. 30 warships, 4 submarines, 80 aircraft. The Kursk's assignment was straightforward: conduct a simulated torpedo attack on the flagship battlecruiser Pyotr Veliky. The torpedo they loaded into tube number 4 was a Type 6576A, a practice round with no warhead. It was 10 meters long and weighed 5 tons. It used a fuel called high-test peroxide, which is concentrated hydrogen peroxide. This fuel is cheap and powerful, but it is also dangerously unstable. If it comes into contact with certain metals, particularly copper alloys, it decomposes violently. The torpedo had come from a 1990 production batch. 6 out of 10 torpedoes from that batch had already been rejected for faulty welding. This one had not. At 11:28 in the morning on August 12th, a faulty weld in the torpedo casing failed. High-test peroxide leaked out, contacted the bronze fittings inside the tube, and detonated. The first explosion was equivalent to roughly 150 kilograms of TNT. It registered on Norwegian seismic monitoring stations as a magnitude 1.5 event. The blast destroyed the torpedo tube doors and blew through the bulkhead between the first and second compartments. A ventilation valve between the compartments had been left open, which was standard Russian practice during torpedo loading. Fire and toxic gas poured directly into the command center. All 36 men in the second compartment were killed or incapacitated within seconds. Nobody activated the emergency ballast blow. Nobody sent a distress signal. 2 minutes and 14 seconds later, the fire reached the remaining torpedo warheads. 5 to 7 of them detonated simultaneously. The second explosion was equivalent to 2 to 7 tons of TNT. It registered between 3.5 and 4.2 on the Richter scale. Seismic stations across northern Europe detected it, and monitoring stations in Alaska detected it. A hole roughly 2 square meters was blown through the pressure hull. Seawater flooded in at approximately 90,000 liters per second. Compartments 1 through 4 collapsed. The submarine dropped to the seabed and slammed into the clay at a depth of 108 meters. The bow plowed 22 meters into the bottom. Here is a detail that tells you everything you need to know about the state of the Russian Navy in 2000. The submarine carried an emergency rescue buoy designed to release automatically and float to the surface, broadcasting the boat's position. It did not deploy. It had been welded shut during the Mediterranean patrol the year before, so that American ships could not detect it and track the Kursk. Nobody had unwelded it. The one device designed to save the crew in exactly this situation had been permanently disabled to avoid embarrassment. But 23 men survived both explosions. They were stationed in the rear compartments, 6 to 9, far enough from the blasts to live through them. They abandoned their stations and gathered in the 9th compartment, a small emergency space at the very back of the submarine. It was designed for 3 people. 23 men crowded into it. The senior officer among them was Captain-Lieutenant Dmitri Kolesnikov, the turbine unit commander. He was 27 years old. He had married a woman named Olga 4 months earlier in April 2000. A few weeks before deploying on this exercise, he had written her a poem. The last line read, "When the time comes to die, though I drive away such thoughts, all I ask is that time whisper, 'Darling, I love you.'" Kolesnikov took charge. He compiled a list of every man in the compartment. At 1:15 in the afternoon, roughly an hour and 45 minutes after the second explosion, he wrote the first note. The lights were still working at this point, powered by emergency batteries. The handwriting is neat and steady. All personnel from sections 6, 7, and 8 have moved to section 9. There are 23 of us here. We feel bad, weakened by carbon dioxide. Pressure is increasing in the compartment. If we head for the surface, we will not survive the compression. We will not last more than a day. 2 hours later, at 3:15 in the afternoon, he wrote again. By now, the lights had failed. The handwriting is barely legible. It is dark to write here, but he said he would try by feel. It seems like there are no chances, 10 to 20%. Let us hope that at least someone will read this. Here is the list of personnel from the other sections who are now in the 9th and will attempt to get out. Regards to everybody. No need to despair. On the back of the same sheet, he wrote a message to his wife. Russian authorities have never released the full text. The fragments that have been made public include Olga, I love you, and do not worry too much. What killed them was not the water, it was the AIR. The compartment had chemical oxygen regeneration cartridges, canisters of potassium superoxide that absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. The men opened at least 9 of them. At some point, someone dropped a cartridge. It fell into the oily seawater that had been rising on the deck. Potassium superoxide reacts violently with water and hydrocarbons. The cartridge ignited. The flash fire was brief, but it consumed the remaining oxygen in the compartment. Forensic investigators later found fire marks on the bulkheads at waist height. 3 sailors had chemical burns on their upper bodies, consistent with shielding other men from the flames. The 23 men suffocated. The official Russian investigation concluded that all of them died within 8 hours of the explosion. But there is evidence that some may have survived longer. A note attributed to senior warrant officer Andrei Borisov was reportedly dated August 15th, 3 days after the sinking. Russia has never released this note despite court orders from the families. Now here is the part of this story that I cannot get past. At the time of the sinking, Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, had been in office for 4 months. He was vacationing at his Black Sea villa in Sochi when he was informed on the morning of August 13th. He stayed on vacation for 5 days. He hosted a televised barbecue the day after the disaster. The Russian Navy's first public statement, issued on August 14th, 2 days after the explosion, stated that the Kursk had experienced minor technical difficulties, that it had descended to the ocean floor, and that contact had been established with the crew. They said air and power were being supplied. They said everyone on board was alive. Every single one of those claims was false. No two-way contact was ever established. Russia attempted its own rescue using 2 aging deep submergence vehicles, the AS-34 and AS-32. The AS-34 collided with the Kursk's stern on its first dive and was damaged. On subsequent attempts, it located the escape hatch but could not form a seal because the hull was listing and tilted. The batteries died. Spare batteries were not available. The second vehicle, the AC-36, also failed. The crane ship deploying it was caught in heavy seas. Between August 12th and August 17th, Russia made at least 6 failed rescue attempts with broken equipment, dead batteries, and no backup plan. Meanwhile, Norway, Britain, the United States, France, Germany, Israel, and Italy all offered help. Some offered within hours of the disaster. Russia said no. For 5 days, while 23 men sat in the dark at the bottom of the Barents Sea, Russia refused to let anyone help. On August 17th, Putin finally authorized acceptance of foreign assistance. The Norwegian dive support vessel Seaway Eagle, operated by Stolt Offshore and carrying 12 elite saturation divers, was diverted from oil platform work and arrived at the site on August 19th. On August 20th, divers began working on the aft escape hatch. Russian officials had told the Norwegians to turn the air control valve counterclockwise. It did not work. The divers eventually turned it clockwise. It opened. On the morning of August 21st, they opened the inner hatch. A large volume of pressurized air rushed out. Then, silence. The compartment was completely flooded. Every one of the 23 men was dead. They had been dead for days. Northern Fleet Admiral Mikhail Motsak announced that all 118 crew members had perished. Admiral Vyacheslav Popov, the fleet commander, removed his beret on camera and said the words, "Forgive me for not bringing back your boys." On September 8, 2000, during the United Nations Millennium Summit in New York, CNN host Larry King asked Putin on live television what happened with the submarine. Putin paused. Then he gave a small smile and said 2 words: "It sank." In October 2001, the Dutch firms Mammoet and Smit International raised the Kursk in the largest submarine salvage operation ever performed. 26 custom grippers were bolted through the hull. 26 strand jacks pulled simultaneously for 15 hours. The bow section, destroyed beyond recovery, was sawed off with an abrasive cable and left on the seabed. It was later destroyed with explosives. 115 of the 118 bodies were recovered and identified. 3 were never found. Kolesnikov's body was among those recovered. The note was still in his pocket. No one has ever been criminally charged. The official investigation blamed a faulty torpedo weld and negligence, incompetence, and mismanagement. Admiral Popov was transferred to a Senate seat. The defense minister resigned 6 months later. Putin was re-elected. Today there is a memorial at Serafimovskoye Cemetery in St. Petersburg, where 32 of the Kursk crew are buried. The granite monument lists all 118 names. Engraved beneath them are the last words Dmitri Kolesnikov wrote in the dark, at the age of 27, 4 months into his marriage, at the bottom of the Barents Sea. Do not despair. Olga Kolesnikova was 26 when she was widowed. She later told Russian television that she had a premonition her husband did not die instantly. She said the pain she felt then has come true. She said she would have preferred not to have received that last letter. She would have preferred him to die straight away, because this love letter is cruel. If your family has a connection to the Kursk or to any submarine disaster, please share it in the comments.